Introduction to Alteryx. Basic transformation. Alteryx makes basic data transformation easy and, most importantly, repeatable, meaning you don't have to perform the same cumbersome tasks on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. We're going to introduce you to a number of these transformation tools that will make your life much easier in the long term. Let's start by introducing you to the problem our business is facing. At present, we receive sales data on a monthly basis. 4 new columns are added to the table for each upload: a sales column, a quantity column, a discount column, and a profit column, each prefixed by the month and year that they represent. I want to be able to answer a number of business questions for each of my regional sales managers. Question 1. What is the profit ratio in each state? Question 2. What are the top 5 selling products in each region? And question 3. What is the percentage of sales volume with which each subcategory represents? As per our newfound knowledge from the previous training, let's start by bringing our data into Alteryx. And to do this, I'm going to navigate to my Excel file using an input data tool and read our data into Alteryx. Immediately, you see the problem that we have. There are so many columns, it's extremely difficult to work with, especially with the new columns coming in each month. What I'd like is for a column for each of my profit, sales, quantity, and discount fields, and then a row for each month and year. In order to do this, we can transpose our data. So firstly, I'm going to transpose all of our value fields into a single column. By using the global search, I can search the word transpose and you'll see the transpose tool appear. I'm going to drag this onto the canvas and connect it to my input data stream. While the transpose tool, our key fields represent the values we want to maintain as a column, the data fields are those that we wish to create a new line for. A key thing to look at here is the bottom of the data field in the transpose tool. The option dynamic or unknown fields is something you will see a lot, especially since Alteryx is asking if we like to treat unknown fields in this way, in this case as a data field. As we have new data coming in this instance we would like to check this box. Once I've run the workflow, by scrolling to the right, it's possible to see how Alteryx has pivoted my data according to the configuration I set. Now I'd like to generate a date field. I could do this in a number of ways, but I'm going to use a formula tool. The formula tool has a wide variety of functions that you're probably used to working within SQL or Excel. So firstly, I need to specify whether I want to update an existing column with the result or generate a new column. I'm going to generate a new column. I should also specify the date type. Given that I'm creating a date field, I'm going to call the field date and change the date type to date too. I'm then going to start building my syntax. So within the formula tool, Alteryx will try and help you by giving you suggestions on the functions and fields that you are using. If you get stuck with the syntax tool, it's got a neat built-in dictionary of the functions available and how the syntax can be structured. I'm simply going to take the left 7 characters and then suffix with the day value of 01. I also want to generate a field which returns the metric, in that whether the rows relate to sales or profit. To do this, I'm going to need to split my data on the underscore. By searching split, I get a number of results. The one most relevant for this problem is the text to columns tool. This allows me to split data on a delimiter to a number of columns, or slightly confusingly, to rows. So you'll see the result from this tool leaves me with some poorly named columns, and also some that I don't need at all. In order to correct this, I'm going to use the select tool, which is one of the most used tools in Alteryx, to deselect unnecessary fields, correct the data type of fields if necessary, and also rename fields. If you want to change the data type of a number of columns at once, then another tool that may be useful is the autofield tool, where Alteryx scans through the values and determines the optimal data type for your fields. This can be hugely powerful in optimizing the size of data sets. So let's run our workflow again and view the results at this point. Now, if you recall our initial exploration of the Alteryx user interface, you may remember the visual prompts that give detail on the data quality within the field. So when hovering over my value field, you'll notice I have a significant amount of null values. We can do two things in this instance. The first thing is we could bring in a data cleanse tool onto the canvas. This tool allows us to very quickly improve the data quality of fields, in this instance by replacing the null values with zeros. Alternatively, we can use the filter tool to remove lines where the value is null, as they're not needed in our analysis. So in order to do this, I will go to the preparation tool group and bring a filter tool onto my canvas. I'll select my value field and select the operand is not null. And so by hitting run and viewing the results, you'll notice that we now have two output anchors, one denoting T or true. These are records that meet the criteria, and the second F denotes false and contains records that do not meet my criteria. Within the filter tool itself, it's also possible to use a custom expression to write more complex acceptance criteria regarding which records should be seen as true and which should be seen as false. The final piece of transformation that needs to be done before answering my questions is bringing through the metrics as columns, now instead of rows. So to do this, we need the opposite of transpose. You may have noticed that the transpose tool forms part of the transform group. If I navigate to the transform group, you'll see a tool that has the opposite icon to transpose, which in this case is the crosstab tool. So I'm going to bring this tool onto my canvas, and here I can specify my group by fields. My header field, in that the column that contains the members which I want to become headers. And finally, the value field that contains the values that will fall into each of these columns. I must also specify an aggregation method, and here I'm going to use sum. So at this point, we've now got our data structured in a way that will allow us to answer business questions more easily, and more important, dynamically. If new columns are added to the source sheet, the data will automatically flow through. So let's start with our first question. What is the profit ratio for each state? Our data is at a lower level of granularity than state level. So the first thing we need to do is aggregate our data to this level by creating something like a pivot table. And we can do this using the summarize tool. I'm going to group by my state field and then return the sum of sales and the sum of profit. From this result, I can then use fields to calculate my profit ratio using the formula tool. So finally, I can use the sort tool to order my states, and I can do this so that I can see my new profit ratio in descending order with the highest value first. The next question we wanted to answer was, what are the top 5 selling products in each region? So again, we'll need to aggregate our data, this time returning the sum of sales, grouping by region and state. So we should then sort our data by region and then in descending order by sales. So by running the workflow at this point, we sort of have our result. Since we have an understanding of the top 5 for each region by simply looking at the list. But what if I want them as a separate data stream? This can be achieved using the sample tool. So the sample tool has an array of options that can be useful for us in a number of scenarios, such as the ability to skip n records. This can be useful when working with a data input that doesn't always start on the first row. You'll also see in the configuration pane, it's possible to return the first n records. Let's set this to 5. So you can also set a group by criteria in that return me the first 5 records for each x. X in this instance would be our region. Now, when we run the workflow again, we get 20 records, the top 5 states for each region. The final question we wanted to answer was to return the percentage of total sales volume for each subcategory. And so you guessed it, firstly, we're going to aggregate our data to the right level of detail using the Summarize tool. I really can't stress how often you're likely to use this tool. So we're going to group by our subcategories and return the sales volume. And now we need to calculate the denominator, which represents our overall sales volume. And so to do this, I'm going to bring on a second Summarize tool, and I can attach it to the one that we've added previously. So this time, no aggregation is required. We just want the sum of our sales volume. So let's run this workflow. And you'll see that we now have 2 data streams. We need to bring our denominator in line with our numerators, and this can be achieved using the append tool. And the append tool allows us to append all rows that exist in a smaller dataset against all values in a larger dataset. If we have one row that we're simply going to have the same number of rows as before. If we have 2 rows, then we'll double our dataset, and so on. Now, we have this value in line with our data, and so we can simply use a formula tool to create our percentage of total. I can also use the round function to limit our resulting value to 2 decimal places. Perfect. And so that's it for our overview of the most common data transformation techniques. There are some other extremely common tools that are well worth reading up on. The multi-row formula tool is very useful for filling down columns of data, whilst the multi-field formula tool allows us to perform the same calculation on a number of columns at once. For more advanced parsing techniques, it's also well worth looking into the regex tool. Next, we'll look at how you can enrich your data using joins and unions.